Hey everybody. Um, yes, I'm trying to caffeinate and wake up. It is early in the morning when I'm doing this. We've been talking about a lot of issues concerned with libraries around the state of Pennsylvania and touching on the American Library Association, which is a national organization. And I thought it might be worth taking some time and discussing the ALA in a little more detail, and particularly its president, so we can kind of um, highlight the issues and maybe help people understand what really is at stake here. This is the United States of America, and we have our differences, but I think that most people, particularly folks that are not really um, obsessed with politics, aren't involved in sort of the inside baseball aspects of politics. Most people just kind of have this baseline assumption that yeah, we have differences and see things different ways, but there are a lot of things on which we just absolutely all fundamentally agree, right? Like that we have a constitutional republic, a democratic form of government, that we have free enterprise, etc. And the basic building blocks of our social, economic, and political structure are not really in question. So that's not true. And it's shocking and it's really unpleasant to contemplate. And probably most of us wish we didn't really live in a world like that, but it is nonetheless true. And I think this is a case that really illustrates that. So the American Library Association is a national organization, and the libraries in the country are the vast majority of them affiliated with the ALA. Some of the ones in Pennsylvania will sometimes try to claim that they aren't affiliated with the American Library Association, which is kind of one of these sleight of hand things, right? Because they are affiliated with the Pennsylvania Library Association, which is in and of itself affiliated with the ALA. So telling me that you're not part of the ALA is kind of like telling me you don't live in the United States, you live in Pennsylvania. Okay, come on. You know, enough with the semantics. The ALA is an incredibly influential organization, and it's really pushing a really aggressive, very radical agenda. Again, something probably most of us don't want to think about, don't want to talk about, and find hard to believe that somehow we got to a point in our history where we got to worry about political agenda being foisted on us by the local library. But it's nonetheless true. So let's grab a hold of this, because I think this goes to the heart of the matter. The president of the American Library Association is a lady named Emily Drabinski. So she describes herself, her verbiage, not mine, as a queer Marxist. So let's just leave the whole queer issue aside. We can talk about that another time. It is not in her verbiage just simply a synonym for the fact that she's a lesbian. That's not what she means to imply, but let's just leave that alone for right now. Let's just focus on the fact that this is a lady who is the actual elected president of the American Library Association, an incredibly influential outfit. And she says she's a Marxist. So what the heck does that mean? It's not just a throwaway word. I think a lot of people don't really think about that. They think of it as something you say and it means you're liberal or progressive or something generic like that, right? And that's not at all what it means. It means a number of things very explicitly, and they're kind of important. So if you say you're a Marxist, you are a follower of the teachings of Karl Marx. Karl Marx is a German philosopher who wrote and organized back in the mid 1800s. Most notably, he and a guy named Engels wrote the Communist Manifesto, which is the Bible of world communism. Karl Marx and Engels created communism. That's what Marxism is. So what does that mean? I mean, they were around for some period of time. They wrote the manifesto. I've read it multiple times. You can certainly get a hold of it pretty much anywhere. I'm not sure I would recommend you waste your time reading it, but you certainly can. It's there in black and white, and it's very, very clear. So what did Marx and Engels believe? What did they recommend? By the way, let's just keep in mind that Marxism, communism, is the form of government and economic and social organization that existed in the Soviet Union. It is communist China. It is communist Cuba. It is North Korea. We could go on down this list. These are the communist Marxist nations of the world. So when you say you are a Marxist, you are saying you subscribe to the principles that are the bases for those nations. Okay, so what's that mean? Ms. Drinsky, when you say you're a Marxist, what do you stand for? Well, first of all, the abolition of private property. Bedrock principle. You don't own anything in communism, and that's not a metaphor. That's not a expression that means you're getting poorer. It means literally, legally, there's no such thing as private property. You don't own your house. You don't own your car. That's assuming you have a house. You don't own furniture. You don't own anything. You can't. Private property in a Marxist society does not exist. Done. Not limited. Again, you're not poor. Private property simply doesn't exist. Everything is owned by the state. And by state, when I'm talking about Marxism, I'm talking about state in the sense of political theory. In other words, the government. The government owns everything. There is no free enterprise under Marxism. The steel mill belongs to the government. The trucking company belongs to the government. The supermarket belongs to the government. Any enterprise you can imagine is owned by the state. There is no private property, and there is absolutely no free enterprise. You don't have a company. You don't have the right to create a company or be a contractor or do anything on your own. The government owns everything, controls everything. There is no religion expressly under Marxism. Religion was criticized very severely by Karl Marx. He claimed it was the opiate of the masses, false, delusional. And really, for control, everybody's got to stand naked before the state. So you can't believe in a God, a savior. You can't be a Christian, Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist, Sikh. You can't be a Jew. There is no religion that's expressly outlawed, and churches, synagogues, temples closed, people imprisoned if you attempt to practice your faith. So that's another cardinal principle of Marxism that Ms. Drabinski, head of the ALA, believes in. No family. Marx was crystal clear on this. Marx was a lot of things. He was not subtle and he was not ambiguous. He believed in the abolishment of the family. We must abolish the family. Again, there can't be any structures between you and the state under Marxism. There has to be total control. You as an individual are naked before the state. Fathers, mothers, uncles, aunts, family connections, clan connections, tribal connection, whatever social structure you can imagine that exists all over the world has to go away. Cannot exist. Your mind belongs to the state from birth. So the state, the government, educates you, indoctrinates you, controls you. You don't get values from mom and dad until they can figure out how to do this completely with a test tube. Mom and dad are necessary to create you. But from that point on, the state owns you. Again, not ambiguous. Pick up the Communist Manifesto. Read anything by Karl Marx. Abolishing the family, absolutely critical to Marxist thought. And again, the head of the ALA is very proud of telling you that she is a Marxist. Okay, now let's just consider this other piece of this, okay? Ironically enough, Drabinski became president as a Marxist, became president of the ALA in an election. She didn't descend from heaven as the president. She wasn't appointed by some mystical authority. She had to run for the office. So a majority, and in fact, a large majority of the ALA's representatives from all over the country voted to put in place a lady who described herself very openly as a Marxist, campaigned as a Marxist. So the ALA chose to make their leader a communist. So we're not just talking about Drabinski, right? We're talking about the overwhelming majority of representatives of the ALA apparently are fine with all of those principles that, I'm just going to go out on a limb here and say, I think they're all dramatically at odds with what the majority of the American people want or believe. So the Freedom Caucus down in Harrisburg in Pennsylvania, where I live, has been pushing to cut off any state funding to libraries associated with the ALA, has been pushing to force Pennsylvania libraries to walk away from the ALA, continuing to beat that drum. They've come out recently with some further announcements in that vein. And I think maybe now you understand how important an issue this is in regard to your local library, that we are used to thinking of these places as being community resources, which they absolutely are and should be, as places that we probably have spent a lot of time in our lives. I know that's true for me. And it's really hard to wrap your head around the fact that, as with so many other institutions in our country, they have been co-opted and sort of seized by folks whose thinking is very much at odds with ours. And you begin to understand that this is a really vital thing. The last thing I'm going to say about the whole library debate, at least for today, is this. The standard response to all criticism of the libraries, their policies on providing completely age-inappropriate material to kids, preventing parents from looking at what their kids are reading, all this stuff. The standard response is to accuse anybody who criticizes them of being a book banner, a book burner, a Nazi, a Neanderthal. I don't know. I'm sure I've missed some words there, but you get the point, right? This is the standard attack. This is what you have to understand. This is not an innocent debate. This is not reasonable minds can disagree. When you are accused of being a book burner by these folks, it's not because they really think that. It's because it is a very deliberate, very specific tactic, and you need to just accept it as that. If I criticize Black Lives Matter, another expressly Marxist organization, for doing things like, I don't know, burning police precincts, I'm racist. If I criticize folks who want to push, gender transition surgery on little kids and mutilate them, if I criticize them, I'm transphobic or I'm homophobic or what. Okay, that goes with the territory. It is designed to intimidate you. It's designed to make you shut up. It's designed to make you afraid to stand your ground. And unfortunately, it works in all too many cases, right? In all too many cases, folks that are really concerned about things going on in the libraries, for instance, are terrified of standing up and fighting back because they'll be accused of being ignorant savages. You just got to put your armor on, folks, and you got to wade through it. Okay. Nobody's talking about banning books. Nobody's talking about burning books. There are a lot of accusations floating around about specific books that have been banned various places. If you look into it, you will find out that is not true. It may in fact be true that there are particular books that have been deemed to be inappropriate for certain ages, that little kids are not ready to be exposed to certain material. That is definitely true. Nobody's banned books. Nobody's burned books. Nobody's preventing the publication of books. Deliberate lie, and it's a deliberate tactic. None of this has to do with preventing the dissemination of information. None of it has to do with trying to get rid of libraries. None of it has to do with freedom of thought and so forth. Look, behind me is a piece of my library. I'm sitting in my office. I've got so many books I've run out of space for. I read voraciously all the time. I donate books all the time to the local free lending library because, I think they're worth disseminating, and because frankly, I don't have any room. I would need another house to fill with books. I'm so obsessive about reading. When I sit down like this in this location where I do a lot of interviews and Zoom calls and so forth, I frequently am waiting for a call to start for 10 minutes. I'm so obsessive about reading. I keep stacks of books at locations like this around my house so that if I got 10 free minutes, I can pick up a book and start reading it. All right. Here's the stack just sitting next to my computer. Thermopylae, right? Leonidas, Fighting the Persians. In the Steps of St. Paul. Great book, by the way. Takes all the biblical history regarding St. Paul, all the secular history regarding St. Paul, talks about the locations where he went and ministered, what they were then, also talks about, combines that with the author visiting them now and talking about what they look like now. All right. I'm not much of a biblical scholar, but I find this book fascinating. Here we go. Here's the juxtaposition. West Virginia Coal Wars. That was a jump, huh? Always with Honor. This is a book written by a white Russian general during the Russian Civil War. By white, I mean that's what the guys who were fighting the communists, the Reds, were called, the White Army. This is his personal memoir of trying to save Russia from the communists. This book, The Great Warming. This is a book written by a bunch of scientists about the history of climate change, climate changes that have occurred long before industrialization, and trying to get to the heart of how much of what we're seeing now is real, how much of it is man-made. That's 5 books sitting right here. Nobody is talking about banning books. Nobody's talking about burning books. Nobody's talking about enforcing any one specific ideology. Amongst those books back there are at least a couple of Bibles. There's also at least 3 Qurans given to me by Muslim friends I worked with overseas for years. And God knows how many other ideologies. The Kama Sutra is up there somewhere. Nobody's talking about banning anything, guys. Nobody's talking about burning things. What we're talking about is telling you to get Karl Marx out of our library. That's what we're talking about. Okay. I'm going to run off to Philadelphia, where I am attending a meeting of a number of conservative Black leaders about organizing in the African American community for the 2024 election. I will talk to you guys soon.